Hey, 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 welcome back to the Fulfillment Formula series. I'm Nicole Roberts Jones, and I'm excited, always excited to be here to pour into you. So, like I just said, this is part three in a three-part series. So, if you haven't watched part one and part two, if you don't know anything else about me by now, the way I teach one thing, I teach builds on the next. That's why I do series because this will be over an hour and a half, probably 2 hours, really, because y'all know when I get talking, right? So my goal in this series is to give you the tools up front as we launch this podcast to go after work that sets your soul on fire, to go after a life full of meaning and fulfillment. Oh, there's so much more than this series that I'm going to give you. So with that, let me do a quick review. As you know, this series is based on this Bible verse. Then God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion. So you see what's highlighted. So obviously, you know, it's time for us to talk about multiply, right? But really, what I'm talking to you about in this series is what I call the fulfillment formula. The fulfillment formula. So we've talked about the D, we've talked about the F, and now we're at the M. And some of you guys are like, but Nicole, how does that and what does that mean? And I don't understand. And I get it. I get it. So, just to make sure you have context to everything I'm sharing, let me put it to you like this. By the way, you've heard me say this. The fulfillment formula is D plus F equals M. We're at M, but I call it the DFM formula. If you haven't gotten the book free, gifting it to you because I want you to be able to do the work. Listen, it's one thing for you to join me for these episodes. It's another thing for you to be able to implement, activate, to move your career, your business, your work to another level. I'm going to talk to you about that in this episode, but you need to do the work. As Ayanna Van Zant would say, you got to do the work. So listening to this is not going to be enough. It gives you some great insight, but you've got to implement the insight. And that's what this book does. DFMFormulaBook.com is where you go. All right. So, with that said, let me continue with a little bit of review. So, as you know, as I'm walking you through the DFM formula, really what it is my brilliance framework. Okay. So, four parts to the brilliance framework. The first two parts were episode one. What do you love? What are you passionate about? And what are you really, really great at? That's your proficiency. Those two together is where God created you to have dominion. And I call that dominating in your lane. Then our last episode, I talked to you about being fruitful, which is you are an answer to a problem. My question to you is, are you clear on the answer that you are the prescription to? And I need you to understand your business. Even if you work a 9 to 5 and you work for a major corporation, your role is a part of an answer that your business was created to answer. Y'all get that? So whether you are an entrepreneur or you're a 9 to 5er, the business you work for, if it's giving God back a return on his investment, we're going to talk about that too in this episode. It is an answer to a problem. Y'all get that? hmm So, as we move into this next one, as we move into where we are today, which is to multiply. Now, I call it profit. I'm gonna show you why I use both of these terms. You're gonna hear me papers. By the way, you guys, if you ever see me looking down, I got tons of notes because I want to make sure I give you everything I intend to give you in these episodes, and you can hear paper moving around because I'm moving my notes and my slides. So listen, this one is the multiply piece. I call it profit. Why do I call it profit? The word profit means a valuable return to gain. And I wonder if you even think about, are you gaining for God? That's the whole reason why he gave you dominion. He wants you to produce a good result in that you gain. You get that? See, many of us think profit is money. We're going to do a whole series about money because God does want you to be wealthy. That's my next series. So stay tuned. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. And listen, I've done other trainings and workshops on this whole aspect of God and money. But those of you that are saying, oh, I've heard you talk about this before, listen, I've grown. We're going to talk about increase here, which moves us to our next definition. Multiply means to increase or cause to increase greatly in number or quantity. Listen, your bio, your resume is done, is complete. That version of you is done. My question to you is, what's the next version of you that you have not yet become? That's what we're looking at when we talk about increase. So you put these two definitions together. It's a valuable return to gain, increase or cause to increase. Now, listen, isn't a valuable return and gaining means you're increasing? Come on, somebody, right? Matter of fact, in the Lord's Prayer, the whole prayer is Matthew 6, 9 through 13. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it says in the prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Excited about you listening to our guest that comes up next week. Pastor Petrie goes in on that because we're living in God's down payment. But many of you aren't. You're so focused on heaven. What are you doing on earth? Because it says on earth as it is in heaven. God gave you a little piece of Him in you. Talked about that episode one. I might. Yeah, I talked about that episode one. Because you have a part to play to bring the kingdom here. And the thing I think is so interesting is many of us don't realize that God wants us to live in extraordinary. Think about that. The word extraordinary is extra and ordinary together. So it took extra and ordinary for a little black girl from Compton, California, put the extra with the ordinary to become Serena Williams. Hello, tennis star. It took the extra with the ordinary for another little black girl, and she didn't have to be black, let's say little girl, from 9 years old who practiced in her backyard every single solitary day after school, every summer to become Beyonce. That's the extra with the ordinary. It was a little black girl from the south side of Chicago who became our phenomenal first African American first lady. Hello, Michelle Obama. It's funny, all these examples I'm popping in my head are all black women, but fellas, don't think this doesn't include you. And if you're not a black woman, this includes you, but I'm always going to talk from what I look like. I'm just saying. And even a little girl who got raped and abused, who probably didn't even feel like she was worthy to become Oprah. See, ordinary will keep you stuck where you are. And if you want to be ordinary, then this is not the podcast for you. I'm going to tell you right now. If you're good with being mediocre and good enough, and yes, you could be making a six-figure salary and still be living in good enough because you're settling. And somehow there's something that is what's coming up in me. There's a Bible verse. We used to sing this song in church called Stir Up the Gift. Stir it up, stir it up. And there's something stirring up in you, making you hunger for more. That's because God has more for you to do. That's the increase, y'all. That's the extra with the ordinary. Even Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers talked about the secret ingredient to people becoming experts is 10,000 hours of putting in the extra time, like Michael Jordan. So it popped in my head. Michael Jordan didn't make his he's not football, basketball team when he first tried out. I think he was a sophomore or it might have been a junior. I think it was sophomore. But he didn't let that stop him. He put in the extra work it took for him to then make it the following year. And we know where his career went. See, it's the extra, the increase, the gain that is important here in this multiply place. So as profit comes, but I need you to know that money is energy. And again, I'm going to do a whole series on money. But when you don't put the extra in, that extra is not coming. Come on, somebody, right? And so this really was, you guys remember that prayer Jabez that everybody talked about for years? Let me see if that's my next slide before I out myself too early. Okay, no, it's not. So let me just tell you this. This is okay. So step 1, I call that dominating your lane. Step 2, I call that be the answer. Step 3, we're here now. I call this the 10% more rule. Now, I love this picture because have you guys, those of you that have kids, you know how every year they grow? Have you done that little ticker tape against the wall to watch how they grow? See, in the same way, God never intends for you to stay where you started. He never intends for you to stay there. It's just like you don't just go to kindergarten and then you're done with school. You don't just go to freshman year of college and then get your college degree. Mm-mm. There are levels to this. God is always looking for how are you growing and increasing. So the example here is a prayer Jabez. I got a little ahead of myself, right? So prayer Jabez was so big years ago. But I want to just sit here and look at really what Jabez was praying. The thing that's so deep about this prayer is, listen, Jabez was mentioned in the Bible, and there's only two Bible verses. One talks about kind of the genealogy, how he was born, and then it's this one Bible verse that Jabez asked God to this thing. That's it. And yet he's really significant because so many people, so many Bible scholars have studied it. This prayer speaks to increase. Mhm. Oh, that you would bless me indeed. And this is First Chronicles 4:10. Again, prayer Jabez. Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory. Some versions say expand my territory, that your hand would be with me, that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. So God granted him what he requested. Let's think about this for a minute. Okay. Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory. When was the last time you wanted to do more? When was the last time you really thought about it in the context of how am I giving what I'm doing back to God? And this is not just about community service, not just about you giving, donating money. That's great too. But how are you giving your gift back to God? How are you expanding your territory, increasing? How are you gaining for God? The next thing he says is that your hand would be with me, that you would keep me from evil. The thing that I think is so deep, another of my foundational Bible verses, John 10:10, that says, the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. What we always remember is the second part that says, I have come that you have life and have it more abundantly. But we forget to say the enemy comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. Enemy doesn't want you to do great. He doesn't want you to live abundantly. He doesn't want you to be able to put the extra with the ordinary. That's when all these roadblocks and things that happen that try to keep you from it, that your hand will be with me and that you would keep me from evil. Listen, sometimes we do things because we're mad at somebody that did something to us instead of realizing, you know what, I'm not going to let them stop me and steal my joy. I'm going to trust you, Lord, and keep it moving. I remember, didn't know I was going to tell this story. So I remember the last guy I dated before my husband. Public humiliating breakup. Bad. And I remember, by the way, I didn't know I was breaking up. I found out from somebody else that he was dating somebody else that was also a public figure, and he was too. I'm gonna try not to say people's names. And for a minute, I rolled in the ground crying like, "Oh Lord!" And then I thought to myself, "Hold on, wait a minute. God would never send me a man like that, so that's not God." God would never send me a man that would treat me like that. So that man is not a gift from God. Now, he might have been at the beginning, but somewhere along the way, he shifted. And what happens with the many of us, and trust me, I thought about it too. We get bitter and we want to pay back, that your hand will be with me, that I won't cause pain. So I had to keep praying, Lord, I'm trusting you. Lord, I'm trusting you through the tears, through the hurt, through through all the things I was feeling in that moment, betrayal. And I met my husband the next week. And I know that was only because I chose to stay with God, that God's hand was with me in that moment because I didn't cause pain, even though I wanted to. I'm gonna keep it real, right? So as we talk about expanding your territory, the thing that I think is interesting, by the way, have you ever realized that the Bible is a book of stories? It's such a great novel. It is. I've heard people call the Bible the basic instructions for living before you leave the earth. Basic, B-I-B. I'm messing it up. Basic instructions before you leave the earth, something like that. B-I-B-L-E. And it really is. It shows you other people as examples. And I believe Jabez is an example of increase. You know, the other thing that's interesting is when you look at Jesus's miracles that he performed, two of them he multiplied. So go look these up because I'm not going to talk about these here. In Matthew 14:13 through 21, again, Matthew 14:13 through 21, Jesus fed the 5,000. That's when he took the little boy's fish and the loaves and fed 5,000 people. Then in a whole different miracle, which is in Matthew 15:32 through 39, Jesus fed 4,000, again, taking fish and loaves. So, as we look at this whole concept of 10% more, and the reason I called it 10% more instead of 10,000 rules is 10,000 rules sounds like a lot. But if I had to jump from here, and I live in DC to California, can I just jump from here to California? Mm-mm. But if I did 10% from here to there, I could do that. And then I could do 10% more. And then I could do 10% more. Now, I don't know if I could jump all the way to California. I probably should have said from Virginia to DC or something, right? But you get what I'm saying. If I focus on how can I add the extra at 10%, it makes it palatable. It makes it seem doable. So my question to you is, what is that 10% increase that's time for you to go after? So let me give you your 3 steps here and your 10%. The first step is, what will you do with what you have? That's all God is looking at, is what will you do with what you have? So I'm going to bring in a Bible story here. This is the widow's oil. The widow's oil is here. I'm not going to put it on the screen. I'm going to read it quickly. This is 2 Kings 4, 1 through 2. Again, 2 Kings was longer than that. It's 4, 1 through 4. Yes. Okay, I'm going to read parts of it, all right? So a widow says to Elisha is a prophet. She says, listen, your servant, my husband, is dead. This is 2 Kings 4, 1 and 2. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. So Elijah said to her, what shall I do for you? And then the next thing he said is, tell me, what do you have in your house? The first thing he said to her is, what do you already have? Now, the thing that's interesting is what she says right after it. She says, your maidservant has nothing in the house but. So when she says, I have nothing, and then she says, but, that means that you do have something that you're overlooking, that you're minimizing. And for many of you, when you did your first 2 exercises, there's passion and proficiency that you're overlooking, that you're minimizing. Listen, I didn't realize I had a gift for producing people and seeing your natural gifts and how it should align with the work you do. I could do it effortlessly. So I thought, oh, doesn't everybody know how to do that? And many of you do that too. Oh, everybody can do that. Not the way you do it, not the way God crafted you and created you to do it. Nobody can do it like that but you. The question is, are you overlooking it? What if Venus and Serena's dad overlooked the fact that they were a little bit gifted in tennis and he didn't add the extra with it? Or Tiger Woods. I go on and on with the countless number of proteges that we've seen grow up. But what happened is they added the extra with that natural gift that was already there. Y'all get that? So all Elisha did was say to her, what do you already have? And she overlooked it. It's just like Jeff Bezos. When Jeff Bezos started Amazon, he started it in his garage and he was his only employee. It was an employee of one in his garage. Look at where Amazon is today. It doesn't start that way, but he kept growing 10%. Y'all get that? Even Steve Jobs with Apple. I can go on and on with example after example. But the example I love the most here is my girl Beyonce. Listen, when you watch Beyonce's career, she does something great and then she supersedes herself. Like I remember she did that Lemonade album and then she had those babies and then she came out and did this whole concert tour. No, it was the concert. I can't keep up with her, girl. I'm probably saying stuff out of order, but y'all are getting my point, right? Even her last Coach Carter, who would have ever thought she'd go into country music 10% more? That was probably something rumbling inside of her that she added the extra with what she was already doing. Which leads us to number 2. You got to be willing to grow past where you are. You got to be willing to grow past where you are. Commit to grow. So again, number 1 was, what will you do with what you have? Number 2, you got to commit to grow. So going back to the widow's oil story, here's what Elijah says back to her. He ignored her that she said she had nothing because he saw she had something, because she said, but a jar of oil. So he took her butt. What's your butt? If I think about myself, the fact that I worked in television and film for 10 years and casting natural. I was so good at casting. I remember after I quit, I still was getting phone calls, people asking me insight. And what I mean by that is I can naturally see who should be in what role. I could say, I know who you should bring into that for this part. And sometimes it'd be an unknown actor. Like, y'all know Brother Man on Martin. Yeah, I brought him in for that part. Not trying to brag. I'm just trying to show you that I could see people's natural gifts. And I didn't know him from a can of paint. Ended up being our families were both from Galveston, small world. The point I'm making is this. You got to be willing to grow past where you are. When God began to say, okay, I began to feel like something was missing and I love my job, I didn't understand it. What I realize now is God was growing my gift into this new arena that I'm in now. And it started with teenage girls, then it grew to entrepreneurs, and now it's growing with all professionals. I don't know. Can't wait to see what God is going to do next. But anyway, here's what Elisha says back to the widow. This is now 2 Kings 4:3. He says, "Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few." So listen, if you don't know what to do, you got to be coachable. The thing that I've learned in my own journey is anytime I was stuck and didn't know how to grow, I had to find someone that was 10 steps ahead of me on my path that could show me the direction to go in. That's exactly what this widow did. So, whether that's hiring a coach, taking a course, whatever that is, what area is your weakest link in the area that you know you want to increase in? Even if I go back to Venus and Serena, now I haven't met Venus or Serena yet, but in the movie, what did their dad do? He went and found a coach because he realized he had taken them as far as he could take them, that there was another level that they could climb to if they got the right coach, and the rest is history. Mhm. So then the next thing here, when you're growing yourself, you got to do this last thing that the Elisha said to her. This is 2 Kings now 2:4. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons, and then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones. See, sometimes you got to stop talking to everybody about it. Everybody's not going to get the thing that's rumbling inside you. I remember, and I think I told you this when I told my story, when I realized that God was calling me to do this thing called coaching. And back then I didn't know what to call it. My friends were saying stuff to me like, "Are you crazy?" Now, my friends love me and support me, but shoot, I felt crazy too. So you've got to realize this is why having a coach is important. Someone that gets it, someone that's already in the journey that you're going into. Because sometimes your friends will think you're crazy. The people around you won't understand it. But when you're pregnant, nobody's pregnant with your purpose but you. Nobody else can push it out. Nobody else can do any of those things. Now, you might be able to take a Lamaze class to learn how to push it out. Hello, hiring a coach. But it makes a difference. Listen, I remember when Kobe Bryant first started playing basketball. Now, you guys know he went straight from high school right into, not first started playing basketball, first got drafted to the Lakers. He went straight from high school to the Lakers. Many people get drafted from college. He didn't. He skipped that. And his first, I don't can't remember if it was a season or first game, was horrible. He was horrible. You know, the number of people that told him, "Oh, you need to go on back to college and stop. Or you should have gone to college first." He didn't listen to those people. What Kobe did was put the extra with the ordinary, and he practiced. And Kobe, to this day, is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. So again, you got to be willing to grow. So just so I can end the story, because I know you're going to say, "What happened to the widow?" I'm going to read the rest, and then I'm going to give you step number 3. So now this is 2 Kings 4:6 and 7. So she went from him, so she left her coach and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her like the coach told her to, like Elisha, her coach, told her to, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass when the vessels were full that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not another vessel." So the oil ceased. Then she came and told the man of God. So she came and said, Elijah, and he said, "Go and sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest." So when you're willing to do the work to increase, God is always going to give you abundantly above all you can ever ask or think. She started with not knowing she had a thing, with the very thing she needed was already inside of her, and she had to be willing to grow. Now, the last thing you've got to do here in order to increase, which is the 10% rule, is you've got to steward your brilliance. You got to steward your brilliance. Now, if you like me, you grew up in church, you know, you've heard them talk about you got to steward 10%. And they've talked about money for the most part. And some churches do focus on time, talent, and treasure. So I'm talking about your talent here. You've got to steward your talent. Listen, the word steward, well, let me say this. Bible verse. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God, as good stewards. So as each one has been gifted. It's saying that we're supposed to be the answer to each other. You guys get that? Do you see that in that Bible verse? So you know me, I'm about to give you a definition. Stewardship means the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible manager of something entrusted to one's care. See, God entrusted gifts and talents into you, and all God is looking at, what will you do with what I've given you? Ultimately, you doing all these things is about you giving God a great return on his investment. So again, step one is what? What we do with what you have. Step two, you've got to commit to grow, and not just one time, it's lifelong growing. And then number three, you got to steward your brilliance. So I'm going to end this episode with a parable. I'm not going to read the whole parable to you. This is another of my favorites. This is the parable of the talents. I want to encourage you to go back and read it. Matthew 25:14 through 30. I'm going to give you the highlights. Again, Matthew 25:14 through 30. I don't know why my voice wants to act up right now. Nevertheless, here we go. This is what the story is about. Now, in the Bible, you're going to see it says a master and servant. So I'm not going to say master and servants. I say an boss and his employees. So the boss had three employees and he's going away. So he gives each of his employees talents, his money to keep for him while he's gone. He comes back. The first employee invested the money and got three times back. So he gives him gain. Hello, somebody gain, increase. The second one invested as well and got two times back. Hello, gain again. The third one dug a hole in the ground, put the money in the ground. He did nothing with it. Nothing. Mhm. So here is what the boss says to the two employees that did increase. This is Matthew 25:23. He says, well done, good and faithful servants. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter the joy of your Lord. That's that abundantly above all. And then this is what he says to the servant that did nothing. This is Matthew 25:26 through 28. You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to them that has 10 talents. See, when you die and get to meet God face to face, will he say, job well done? Or will he say, take her gifts from her, take his gifts from him, and give it to the person that actually put the extra with the ordinary? Give it to the person that actually did the work while they were on earth to expand their increase, to expand their impact, I should have said, to make a significant impact, to help all the people that needed them, to really hone in on their gift and grow it. And look at all the ways they can increase their serve through their gift. That ultimately is how we give God a great return on his investment. And that, my friends, is the fulfillment formula. Just to remind you, just to go back through it quickly. And if you miss any of these episodes, I'm going to encourage you to go watch them all. And you can watch them over and over again. Grab the book, dfmformulabook.com, because each of these plays a significant role in how you go after all that God has for your life. So again, D, which is your dominion, standing in the one lane God created you to dwell in. Listen, you're not everybody's answer. You're somebody's answer. So stop trying to be everything to everybody and be the one thing God created you to be. Like listen, I remember somebody said to me, Nicole, you give great relationship advice. If I was a relationship coach, I probably would suck at it. I'm good at it with my girlfriends, but I'm not trained in it. There's a difference between should and could. And I could doesn't mean I should. Come on, somebody, right? Fruitful, producing good results. So ultimately, I wouldn't produce good results. I use this example in the first one too. Dominion. If I could sing, Beyonce would have a run for her money, but baby, I cannot. So therefore, I cannot produce a good result. You guys would be like covering your ears if I started singing, unless I had some auto tune or something on it. And ultimately, when you get clear in your lane and you begin to produce good results, God wants you to increase. That's the 10% more. So if you look at what's your 10% goal for this year, even if you want to do a month over month, even if you want to do a quarter over quarter, my challenge to you is what is your 10% more that's going to increase the good result you're putting out in the world, that's going to increase the lane God created you to dwell in. Now, as we continue in our conversations in these podcasts, my goal is to give you more tools and more insight so that you can not just answer that, but there are other things that are in your atmosphere, other pieces beside your gift, like your relationships, like your money, like your health, like your relationship with God, all those things. And so look for guests to come that will pour all those things into you as I welcome you to going after your abundantly above all, to you going after a life full of meaning and fulfillment. It's my honor and my sheer pleasure to bring this insight to you. And with that said, listen, you know what I'm about to ask you. If this episode has given you any insight, if it's blessed you, then please share it. Why I always am I'm gonna ask you to share it because, again, somebody in your network may need this. All right? So with that said, have a phenomenal rest of this day, and I'll see you for our next episode. Bye, y'all.